I hope you have your beverage ready because let's get into the worst films of 2024. I'm usually not one to do a worst films list. I usually do my disappointment list. However, there were overlaps between the most disappointing films and the worst films of this year. Red 1. Now, with Red 1, it's kind of interesting because I wasn't sure if it was going to be one of those so bad it's good movies, and it seemed like it was trying to be one of those so bad it's good movies. It's a PG-13 action movie involving Santa Claus, the rescuing of Santa Claus, something like that. I barely remember this plot, I'm gonna be completely honest. This has like a stacked cast for no reason. We have Chris Evans, who is decent in this movie. We have Lucy Liu. Of course, we have The Rock because he's in everything nowadays. J.K. Simmons. Anyway, my thoughts on the movie. It's a 2-hour and 30-minute movie with 30 minutes of exposition. There is no reason for that much exposition. I'm sorry. Now, this movie felt like a straight to stream movie, and no shade, but it actually works best on that platform. I almost was going to watch this movie on a $5 movie night just for kicks and giggles. Yes, I'm saying kicks because I'm trying to get monetized up in here. This one was bad. I'm glad I saved my money. But I really do think that this film was self-aware to the fact that it is very silly, that this is a somewhat grown-up Christmas movie. However, the only thing that I really do admire about this movie is not really a spoiler, but whatever. But there is a present delivery scene, like a Santa present delivery scene in this. And honestly, this is like the best depiction, or one of my favorite depictions of Santa present delivery in cinematic history next to the Santa Claus. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I wasn't into the movie. I didn't like the special effects. I wasn't a fan because there was just a lot of ugly characters in there. I mean, I know that you could argue, yeah, they were supposed to be ugly, but no, they were like ugly. They were really ugly. Strangers Chapter 1. Okay, so I often forget that I even watched this movie, even though this was one of the funnest theater experiences that I've ever had this year. And that actually made up for the movie not being that great. I actually gave it, I would say 4 stars on Letterboxd because I just had a great time watching it. I went to watch it with my best friend Hannah. We had the theater to ourselves. We were cracking up. We were screaming. It was everything. The movie is bad, but what really counts is the friends you made along the way. I mean, I think people are being a little bit harsh on this movie, if I could be completely honest. Now, I would give a little bit of a caveat here. I actually haven't watched the first Strangers movie, and also I'm not really too into home invasion movies. They freak me out so much. Let me know why y'all didn't mess with Strangers Chapter 1 that much. Harold and the Purple Crayon. Now, I feel kind of weird reviewing this movie because I don't know if it's supposed to be targeted to adults. Well, I don't think so, because based on a children's book. But even if it was meant for children, children deserve to have good media too. The biggest problem with this film is that it felt very outdated. Not only did it feel outdated with some of the song choices, with some of the humor, but also with the casting. Like, we have Zooey Deschanel in this movie, and I'm like, what in the 2010s? Also, we have Zachary Levi in that. I don't know, the humor just really did feel like late 2000s, early 2010s kids movie that would have been a banger back in the day, but since it's 2024, it just doesn't hit. Mia Culpa. I am not the biggest Tyler Perry fan, but it did seem like Tyler Perry was on his way of a redemption arc, especially at the time of this movie coming out. This has Kelly Rowland in it. I was so excited to see her act. It has Trevante Rhodes, who is in Moonlight. Obviously, very talented actor. The cinematography looked great. The soundtrack also was great. Tyler Perry was gonna tap into a crime thriller that was kind of sexy. This had potential of actually being good. But then again, it is Tyler Perry. It was melodramatic. It was ridiculous. It was awkward. We have the Tyler Perry tropes of toxic relationships, terrible family members, in this case, terrible in-laws. The main character is a lawyer named Mia because mea culpa is a legal term. So, get it? Mea culpa, blah blah. Anyway, she has an affair with one of her clients. Man, you know what? Tyler Perry really tried to make a sexy movie. Tyler Perry does not write sex scenes really well, or at least how they are choreographed. It just is very awkward. Now, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum. If you thought the paint intimate scene, if that lit off something in you, so be it. It just wasn't for me. And I think Tyler Perry is quoted to say that only uppity Negroes don't like his film. So I guess I'm an uppity Negro then. Speaking of Negroes, the American Society of Magical Negroes. From the jump, I wasn't excited for this. People were saying that, my gosh, is this gonna be a Black Hogwarts type of thing? Are we gonna get a Black Harry Potter? With a name such as American Society of Magical Negroes, I sure hope not. Like the film suggests, this is somewhat of a commentary on the magical Negro trope, where the main character is introduced to that society to be the magical Negro of a white man to help him out. Oh man, I wish I was joking about this. With that being said, this would have actually been an interesting concept. It could have been tongue-in-cheek commentary on the trope itself. However, this movie seemed to inadvertently both feed into the stereotype, yet also be preachy on not necessarily why the stereotype is bad, but why racism is bad and how we should listen to Black people more and care about their feelings. On paper, that's not bad. But it came off as very pandering, which also made me question who the target audience actually was.
Hey, it is Editing Meg here. I also wanted to add that another part of the story is that all of a sudden there's a rom-com element, there's a romance, and that takes up a majority of the plot, which really doesn't make any sense. So it's just overall a mess of a movie.
By far, that is my biggest problem with this movie, because in my opinion, this wasn't really geared to Black audiences, which is a bold choice for the movie literally titled Magical Negroes. Like, imagine a white person going to the movie theater and saying, "Hi, I would like a ticket to the the magical Negro movie." I know there was a lot of like whispering, like magical Negros. Oh my goodness, I can picture it. And also, before anyone twists my words, there's a target audience for everything. That's why you see similar trailers for similar movies. And sometimes those audiences are race and gender based. And I'm not saying that it's inherently bad to make a movie about Black experiences to teach non-Black audiences about something, but it just seemed like the story was misinformed and could have been a great movie for audiences of different races to enjoy, but it just seemed like they were neglecting a demographic that really truly cares about this story more, which are Black audiences. But instead, it backfired. Overall, I think this was a missed opportunity for the magical Negro trope to be dissected in a great way. I'll give a really great movie that breaks down Black tropes really well, and that is American Fiction. I think they did a great job addressing the tropes, but told in a very nuanced way that didn't feel preachy. But it's also just a great character study about the main character, and it doesn't necessarily center around teaching the audience a message. All right. Madam Web. Now, Madam Web, I knew going into this movie that it was going to be bad. Like, even the cast, when it came to the press run, they didn't seem into it. Especially Dakota Johnson. With the unserious nature of this movie, it is so comical. Now, this is basically an origin story. Like, you don't get to see the Spider Women really fighting crime at all. It's really a story about premonitions, almost like Final Destination, which I enjoy. And even though this is one of the worst films of 2024, I actually like it. I like it ironically. And honestly, like, even though it's not a great movie, it's a fun movie. It's a comedy, to be completely honest, and I'm not saying this to be funny. I was actually in a very dark place when I watched this movie the first time. I was experiencing grief at the time that I watched this movie, and yeah, this movie cheered me up. How about that? So, thank you, Madam Web. Now, moving on to the worst movie and the most disappointing movie, Joker Folie à Deux. Bruh. I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. How can you fumble a movie that bad? Like, hands down, this is the most disappointing sequel. Now, when I did my review on Instagram, I gave it a kind of balanced score. Like, I think, I guess the first time I watched it, I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. And I mentioned my pros and cons. And I will do the same thing with this one. The pros: cinematography, really good. I also really like the costume design. I like the concept talking about the East crime era, the rise of true crime spectacle in the 1980s. I thought that was very fascinating. Now let's go into everything else. They made my girl Lady Gaga sound like a bad singer. Todd Phillips wanted to make a musical, but didn't want to commit to making a musical. And that is the biggest problem with Folie à Deux. When you make a musical, you better commit to that Joker. I didn't mean to do a pun, but you better commit to that. So what you get instead with Folie à Deux is get people talk singing or like shy singing, which defeats the purpose of a musical. So in turn, Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix, they're doing like these like shy singing, like, if my friends see me now, like, it is so awkward. And it's so bizarre. Joaquin Phoenix, like, I feel so bad for the man because he is so selective with the roles that he chooses. He spent time away from the industry. And of course, in recent years, he's making his comeback. I wouldn't be surprised if Joaquin Phoenix doesn't make a movie for a long time, if not ever again. Which sucks because he is so talented. But yeah, they also did Joaquin Dirt. They tried to like introduce other characters like Harvey Dent, and I thought it worked, but also I found that it was pretty silly. Especially how they tried to introduce a Harvey Two-Face origin story. The way that they executed it was silly. The musical numbers, there were 2 musical numbers that were actually memorable when they actually worked with the environment. Everything else was really boring. The song choices weren't great. Even though it's a jukebox musical, the songs did not work well with the narrative. Like, Mamma Mia is a jukebox musical using songs from ABBA, but what makes Mamma Mia great is it actually works well with the plot. Joker, not so much. It did not play around with the title Folie à Deux that much, which was a shared delusion. Now, you could argue the shared delusion was that they were the only singers and that was the plot of the movie, but they could have pushed it a lot further. They could have. One thing that I liked about the movie is that there was an animated sequence that teased one of the major plot points of the movie, but then again, it did not follow through. A lot of cool concepts were executed, but they didn't follow through with it. And that's what made Joker Folie à Deux the most disappointing movie and the worst movie, in my opinion, of 2024. Whew. Let me take a sip. Now, Even with my critiques, I respect the hustle for all these films. I was having lunch with one of my friends who was in the film industry. He was telling me a story about one of his colleagues that said, it's hard to make a good film, let alone a great film. So I would say, with all this being said, that hey, at least people got their coin. Art is subjective, entertainment is subjective. So in my next video and next podcast episode, I'm going to talk about my favorite movies of 2024. We'll chat then.